don't we begin? This interview was with Lex Fridman from a couple of months ago, and he speaks with Sam Altman, the founder of OpenAI, and we'll just begin with a little bit of him talking about ChatGPT-4.
High level, what is GPT-4? How does it work, and what to you is most amazing about it?
It's a system that we'll look back at and say was a very early AI, and it's slow, it's buggy, it doesn't do a lot of things very well, but neither did the very earliest computers. And they still pointed a path to something that was going to be really important in our lives, even though it took a few decades to evolve.
Do you think this is a pivotal moment? Like out of all the versions of GPT 50 years from now, when they look back at an early system that was really kind of a leap, in a Wikipedia page about the history of artificial intelligence, which of the GPTs would they put?
That is a good question. I sort of think of progress as this continual exponential. It's not like we could say here was the moment where AI went from not happening to happening. And I'd have a very hard time like pinpointing a single thing. I think it's this very continual curve. Will the history books write about GPT 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 or 7? That's for them to decide. I don't really know. I think if I had to pick some moment from what we've seen so far, I'd sort of pick ChatGPT. It wasn't the underlying model that mattered. It was the usability of it, both the RLHF and the interface to it.
What is ChatGPT? What is RLHF? Reinforcement learning with human feedback. What was that little magic ingredient to the dish that made it so much more delicious?
So we trained these models on a lot of text data. And in that process, they learn the underlying something about the underlying representations of what's in here or in there. And they can do amazing things. But when you first play with that base model that we call it after you finish training, it can do very well on evals. It can pass tests. It can do a lot of, there's knowledge in there. But it's not very useful, or at least it's not easy to use, let's say. And RLHF is how we take some human feedback. The simplest version of this is show two outputs, ask which one is better than the other, which one the human raters prefer, and then feed that back into the model with reinforcement learning. And that process works remarkably well with, in my opinion, remarkably little data to make the model more useful. So RLHF is how we align the model to what humans want it to do.
I guess this is a question for James, and I don't want to interrupt him right now, but maybe next week in a weekly meeting, we can kind of just bring up this idea of human training, human reinforcement, like on the local level. Could we have subscribers, give feedback on, let's see, I guess, well, maybe for writers, like we could offer them multiple, article compositions and they choose the one they like. And could we then feed that back into the system and make it better for local use? You know what I mean? Just kind of like in the same way that hopefully it would be, better at local figures and, identifying them and relating them together. And maybe this is something we could tie into, who knows, that social media plugin. Like, what if all the users could have an option to thumb up or thumb down?
I completely agree. Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's one of the things here when you're using the ChatGPT on the web is every response, you can report it, vote it up, vote it down. A lot of the AI image generation ones are doing that as well. So you can constantly send that kind of feedback. So I would assume that kind of mechanism could be translated. And as you say, James would probably have a much better handle on how the implementation of that would work. But they're already doing those kind of things. So I would expect as they offer the tools that allow for the personalization of the models, that would be part of that.
So are you thinking have the readers have control over the model for the overall site?
They would be providing feedback, yeah.
I guess my initial just worry with that is that's a very small sample size, which gives them outsized control over Like the reason that the GPT model works is because it's literally everyone, which kind of dilutes things.
Well, you notice what he said about how little data the reinforcement learning takes. So if we have, depending on if it's a website data set, I think it would be okay if it's just limited to them being able to influence the reinforcement, but only through that data set. So it wouldn't propagate, it wouldn't do anything else. And then I guess you could, and once again, this would come back to a James implementation discussion, would be like what kind of moderation us as the platform would have on how much affect a certain upvote or downvote would actually affect the model's future inferences and things like that. But I think that is important because that's one of the topics that does come up is the democratization of the alignment process. And we even touched a little bit on this in the last video with Zuckerberg talking about the Wikipedia model. And so that's definitely going to be part of it, especially as Sam really talks about wanting the smaller models, the open source models, the ones that are for research and all that, to be like, leave those guys alone so that they can work through some of these techniques and tools and figure out how to do that, and then can share it with the wider community for other startups and other smaller applications, not just the Bing and the Bards,
Yeah, like I wonder if it is something that we do want to give the subscribers. Maybe you could have like the editors and publishers have like more weight, and then the subscribers, a fraction of that. And
let me go back and take a look here. I'm trying to say, okay, so the train your AI casually fine-tuned, which is an option you can use in different parts of the plugin.
Okay.
So it looks nice UI training, and then the embeddings, and things like that. So I think there may be some tools in here that we could just work with, or James could investigate.
Right.
And there may be some stuff that's already kind of built in that allows. I mean, this right here, I'm very curious what that means. So I know it's a little outside of the scope of this, but I'm going to take a look at this and see if we can find a couple of things that might be leading to the answer to what you brought to the point you brought up.
Yeah. Since it's on the free version, that's what we have active. So that sounds
right.
Good.
All right, let's pick back up here.
Data set to create this kind of background wisdom knowledge that's contained within the internet. And then somehow adding a little bit of human guidance on top of it through this process makes it seem so much more awesome.
Maybe just because it's much easier to use. It's much easier to get what you want. You get it right more often the first time, and ease of use matters a lot, even if the base capability was there before.
And like a feeling like it understood the question you were asking, or like it feels like you're kind of on the same page.
It's trying to help you.
It's a feeling of alignment.
Yes.
I mean, that could be a more technical term for it. And you're saying that not much data is required for that. Not much human supervision is required for that.
To be fair, we understand the science of this part at a much earlier stage than we do the science of creating these large pre-trained models in the first place. But yes, less data, much less data.
That's so interesting. The science of human guidance. That's a very interesting science. And it's going to be a very important science to understand how to make it usable, how to make it wise, how to make it ethical, how to make it aligned in terms of all the kind of stuff we think about. And it matters which are the humans and what is the process of incorporating that human feedback, and what are you asking the humans? Is it two things? Are you asking them to rank things? What aspects are you asking the humans to focus in on? It's really fascinating. But what is the data set it's trained on? Can you kind of loosely speak to the enormity of this data set?
The pre-training data set?
The pre-training data set, I apologize.
We spend a huge amount of effort pulling that together from many different sources. There are open source databases of information. We get stuff via partnerships. There's things on the internet. It's a lot of our work is building a great data set.
How much of it is the memes subreddit?
Not very much. Maybe it'd be more fun if it were more.
So some of it is Reddit, Some of his news sources, all like a huge number of newspapers. There's like the general web.
There's a lot of content in the world, more than I think most people think.
Yeah, there is like too much. Like where like the task is not to find stuff, but to filter out stuff.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
What is there a magic to that? Because there seems to be several components to solve. The design of the, you could say, algorithms, so like the architecture of the neural networks, maybe the size of the neural network. There's the selection of the data. There's the human supervised aspect of it with, RL with human feedback.
Yeah, I think one thing that is not that well understood about creation of this final product, like what it takes to make GPT-4, the version of it we actually ship out and that you get to use inside of ChatGPT, the number of pieces that have to all come together, and then we have to figure out either new ideas or just execute existing ideas really well at every stage of this pipeline. There's quite a lot that goes into it.
So there's a lot of problem solving. Like you've already said for GPT-4 in the blog post and in general, there's already kind of a maturity that's happening on some of these steps, like being able to predict before doing the full training of how the model will behave.
Isn't that so remarkable, by the way, that there's like, there's like a law of science that lets you predict for these inputs, here's what's going to come out the other end. Like, here's the level of intelligence you can expect.
Is it close to a science, or is it still, because you said the word law and science, which are very ambitious terms.
Close to, I said.
Close to, right. Let's be accurate, yes.
I'll say it's way more scientific than I ever would have dared to imagine.
So you can really know the peculiar characteristics of the fully trained system from just a little bit of training.
Like any new branch of science, we're going to discover new things that don't fit the data and have to come up with better explanations. And, that is the ongoing process of discovery in science. But with what we know now, even what we had in that GPT-4 blog post, like, I think we should all just like be in awe of how amazing it is that we can even predict to this current level.
Yeah. You can look at a 1-year-old baby and predict how it's going to do on the SATs. I don't know. Seemingly an equivalent one, but because here we can actually in detail introspect various aspects of the system, you can predict. That said, just to jump around, you said the language model that is GPT-4, it learns, in quotes, something. In terms of science and art and so on, is there within OpenAI, within like folks like yourself and Ilyas Eskever and the engineers, a deeper and deeper understanding of what that something is? Or is it still a kind of beautiful, magical mystery?
Well, there's all these different evals that we could talk about. And
what's an eval?
Oh, like how we measure a model as we're training it after we've trained it, and say like, how good is this at some set of tasks?
And also, just on a small tangent, thank you for sort of open sourcing the evaluation process.
Yeah. I think that'll be really helpful. But the one that really matters is, we pour all of this effort and money and time into this thing. And then what it comes out with, like, how useful is that to people? How much delight does that bring people? How much does that help them create a much better world, new science, new products, new services, whatever? And that's the one that matters. And understanding for a particular set of inputs, like how much value and utility to provide to people, I think we are understanding that better. Do we understand everything about why the model does one thing and not one other thing? Certainly not always, but I would say we are pushing back like the fog of war more and more. And we are, it took a lot of understanding to make GPT-4, for example.
But I'm not even sure we can ever fully understand. Like you said, you would understand by asking it questions, essentially, because it's compressing all of the web, like a huge swath of the web, into a small number of parameters, into one organized black box that is human wisdom. What is that?
Human knowledge, let's say.
Human knowledge.
Good point there.
It's a good difference. Is there a difference between knowledge? So there's facts and there's wisdom. And I feel like GPT-4 can be also full of wisdom. What's the leap from facts to wisdom?
A funny thing about the way we're training these models is I suspect too much of the like processing power, for lack of a better word, is going into using the model as a database instead of using the model as a reasoning engine.
Yeah.
The thing that's really amazing about this system is that it, for some definition of reasoning, and we could of course quibble about it, and there's plenty for which definitions this wouldn't be accurate, but for some definition, it can do some kind of reasoning. And, you know, maybe like the scholars and the experts and like the armchair quarterbacks on Twitter would say, no, it can't, you're misusing the word, you're, you know, whatever. But I think most people who have used the system would say, okay, it's doing something in this direction. And I think that's remarkable and the thing that's most exciting. And somehow out of ingesting human knowledge, it's coming up with this reasoning capability, however we want to talk about that. Now, in some senses, I think that will be additive to human wisdom. And in some other senses, you can use GPT-4 for all kinds of things and say that it appears that there's no wisdom in here whatsoever.
Yeah, at least in interactions with humans, it seems to possess wisdom, especially when there's a continuous interaction of multiple prompts. So I think what on the ChatGPT side, it says the dialogue format makes it possible for ChatGPT to answer follow-up questions, admit its mistakes, challenge incorrect premises, and reject inappropriate requests. But also, there's a feeling like it's struggling with ideas.
Yeah, it's always tempting to anthropomorphize this stuff too much,
Right,
but I also feel that way.
There's folks at OpenAI, including yourself, that do see the importance of these issues to discuss about them under the big banner of AI safety. That's something that's not often talked about with the release of GPT-4, how much went into the safety concerns, how long also you spent on the safety concern. Can you go through some of that process?
Yeah, sure.
What went into AI safety considerations of GPT-4 release?
So we finished last summer. We immediately started giving it to people to red team. We started doing a bunch of our own internal safety evals on it. We started trying to work on different ways to align it. And that combination of an internal and external effort, plus building a whole bunch of new ways to align the model. And we didn't get it perfect by far, but one thing that I care about is that our degree of alignment increases faster than our rate of capability progress. And that I think will become more and more important over time.
Really good point.
And I think we made reasonable progress there to a more aligned system than we've ever had before. I think this is the most capable and most aligned.
Chris, can you explain what he means by that?
I think, I wanted to mention, because this came up in the testimony as well, because there's the letter that was signed by 22,000 scientists or whatnot, saying that there should be a 6-month moratorium on the development. And his response is, we spent more than 6 months from when ChatGPT-4 was done before it actually was released, because he said it was in the summer and then it didn't come out until, February. And so they spent that time with their all the human reinforcement stuff, the red teaming, they said, and getting it all out like that. And basically is confident that they got it as good as they could get it. What did you have a specific? Sorry, I may have not let you finish your question.
Something needs to keep up with something else.
It's the capabilities of the models, and then the ways of guiding the models is the alignment. I think what he's trying to get at is the alignment is keeping ahead of the capabilities.
Right.
So it's not getting away from us, quote unquote. Yeah, here we go.
Started trying to work on different ways to align it. And that combination of an internal and external effort, plus building a whole bunch of new ways to align the model. And we didn't get it perfect by far, but one thing that I care about is that our degree of alignment increases faster than our rate of capability progress.
Yeah, there it is.
And that I think will become more and more important over time. And
okay,
I think we made reasonable progress there.
He definitely thinks that the alignment science is staying ahead of the capabilities of the models themselves.
Yeah, I heard ChatGPT 5 is going to do video. Did you
actually? He said they haven't even started working on ChatGPT 5 yet.
Really? Oh man, where did I?
Yeah,
Okay, must have been some fake news.
It's like, why wouldn't it? Why wouldn't it go full multimodal and all that? But no, in the Senate hearing, he says they're not, because they were talking about, once again, pausing development on the new things, maybe even pulling things back out of the open market. And he's like, as part of that discussion, he's like, they haven't even started training GPT-5 yet. Yeah.
Gotcha.
Which ways it would be a good thing, because they can spend more time aligning, more time working with other companies that are using the tech, and and get the regulatory things in place and all that. So he said, yeah, ChatGPT-5 is just way out. We're not even working on it yet. Yeah.
I'm honestly I don't feel that like knowledgeable or like comfortable talking about some of the safety stuff as I stand right now. If we could boil it down though, from this conversation, I guess like the content contribution stuff could be part of that. Maybe we could focus on it, but yeah, I don't know. It's just, it's a tricky topic.
Well, I did come across an alternative to the human, the basically upvote, downvote kind of deal. Right. And it's called process reinforcement. And basically, when you go through and you watch ChatGPT kind of typing a word, going back and doing this kind of stuff, what this does is it actually shows every step that it's doing, and you rate those individual steps. Right. If it's accurate all the way, you don't just go and rate the output, which is what the RLHF is doing. And so there's going to be some other ways of handling alignment that I think are going to be very, very interesting to look at. You know, it was also in the context of doing math logic and physics and things like that, where you can, give it the math data set, and then you can analyze, it's saying this is the variable, it goes balances here. There's, it's using these inferences, it's doing a polynomial here, and you can kind of rate it. I mean, it basically, the system rates every step for accuracy and feeds all that back into the training to make it that much better. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I'm starting to see how a way I could take it then. So it could be like all based around that concept. And I can maybe even pull that quote from him saying, as long as alignment stays ahead of capability, then, we're safe. And then talk about all the ways you can align. And actually with our plugin, it's sort of what you're describing, like, right? The story composer breaks it down into headline, excerpt, body, and you can change any one piece of that and regenerate the others. So it's sort of like process reinforcement in a way, because it's like the process of writing an article, So, okay, I think I got some really good slides in mind for this now. So that's great. I appreciate that, Chris. Go ahead. Let's hear the rest of this safety stuff.
Well, I wanted to throw just one more thing on the alignment, because that's one of the biggest things that we need to deal with, and this has been coming up, especially as more people are becoming aware of this, and this came up in the hearings, is who's aligning the model, whose values are we aligning with? And basically, Sam came right out and said, we're the US, we did it first. It needs to follow our democratic style of values. And to be a leader on how to handle this kind of stuff. But then you also have to look at other countries who have different values, and they're going to be able to build these models to at least some degree, and they're going to have their own alignment values. So one of the things that's being proposed is something like the IAEA, that's the International Nuclear, the Atomic Energy Regulatory Body. And so they're saying that this kind of comes to that level where the nation states will have kind of alignment constitutions. I think they even said it was an AI constitution, they were talking about it. And then, then you have to kind of like work with other countries, and then the other thing, so that, you're not using cluster munitions on civilians, or allowing an AI to to do this sort of horrible thing or that horrible thing. It's like that's the big challenge, I think, right now. And that's why it's important that that alignment curve stays ahead of the capability curve.
Wow. Okay. Yeah, that's pretty far out stuff.
I will leave it at that, and let's get back to Sam.
I think this is the most capable and most aligned model that we've put out. We were able to do a lot of testing on it, and that takes a while. And I totally get why people were like, give us GPT-4 right away. But I'm happy we did it this way.
Is there some wisdom, some insights about that process that you learned, like how to solve that problem that you can speak to?
How to solve the
alignment problem?
So I want to be very clear. I do not think we have yet discovered a way to align a super powerful system. We have something that works for our current scale called RLHF. And we can talk a lot about the benefits of that and the utility it provides. It's not just an alignment. Maybe it's not even mostly an alignment capability. It helps make a better system, a more usable system. Yeah. And this is actually something that I don't think people outside the field understand enough. It's easy to talk about alignment and capability as orthogonal vectors. Mm-hmm. They're very close. Better alignment techniques lead to better capabilities and vice versa. There's cases that are different, and they're important cases. But on the whole, I think things that you could say like RLHF or interpretability that sound like alignment issues also help you make much more capable models. And the division is just much fuzzier than people think. And so in some sense, the work we do to make GPT-4 safer and more aligned looks very similar to all the other work we do of solving the research and engineering problems associated with creating useful and powerful models.
So RLHF is the process that can be applied very broadly across the entire system, where a human basically votes. What's a better way to say something? If a person asks, "Do I look fat in this dress?" There's different ways to answer that question that's aligned with human civilization.
And there's no one set of human values, or there's no one set of right answers to human civilization. So I think what's going to have to happen is we will need to agree on, as a society, on very broad bounds. We'll only be able to agree on a very broad bounds of what these systems can do. And then within those, maybe different countries have different RLHF tunes. Certainly individual users have very different preferences. We launched this thing with GPT-4 called the system message, which is not RLHF, but is a way to let users have a good degree of steerability over what they want. And I think things like that will be important.
Yeah, I just wanted to give an example of what he's talking about, so we can actually see it. So if we just come over to I just want to come over to the plugin on the staging. So these are what were introduced. These are the and what's interesting here is it actually has like system level prompts for each type of content. So it even goes into that kind of detail. So it knows it's writing for a section. It knows it's writing for an excerpt. It knows it's writing a title based upon this. So that's kind of what that's kind of where you can personalize the responses of the model, even down to this granular level, without any of the RLHF stuff. That was what I wanted to kind of point out about that.
Yeah, like I haven't messed with this at all. So you can change the prompt for a title, write a title for an article about, okay, so like what's an example? You could like change the length there or something, or the writing tone. Okay.
And then let's see, markdown for headings. Look at that. It even has markdown for headings and stuff. So there's actually some formatting stuff that can be put in there. I've never looked at this kind of detail in a system prompt, but I mean, this is where you can basically, for a particular customer, for a particular thing, we said sports post or whatever, these kind of things, these are basically the templates where you have a collection of these system prompts to guide the model.
Well, could I create a template in here, you think, where I have like the who, what, where, when, why of the story, as your input, and then it pulls it together into content?
I would say so. What we need to investigate is what these tokens are. Writing style, writing tones. I believe, it's pulling. Oh, yeah. So it's just pulling from here. So it's pulling these selections into the tokens, and writing tone, it pulls that one in again, title and language. So once it's made the title, it then pulls the title into the token for that. I wonder if these are the only kinds of tokens, or if this is just the way the plugin's built, where he's like, here's the content parameters I want to make available. And by the way, here's the new 32K token one, the big one that takes much longer. I think it's like over 20 pages of text or something now.
So James recently put us back on 3.5 or something. Would that override that, or?
This will be another aside, but I think this is helpful to know. If we go over to the OpenAI playground, this is where you can kind of test out system messages. But what I'm thinking, these are the two. There's the Turbo and the Turbo 16K. So I think by selecting the Turbo model in here, that it's supposed to be automatically updated to the 16K version on, I think it's like they said, all the old models would be deprecated and everybody would be using the new 16K 3.5 Turbo model. I'm pretty sure within by the end of the month, it'll just default to that. That's why I think it's not listed here. Turbo is just Turbo,
Okay, yeah, I'll definitely have to play around with this some more. I didn't know about that, control down there.
Here, I'll just kind of leave the prompt stuff up here while we kind of listen, because that's. I mean, when you're talking about personalization, this is definitely a very strong option outside of completely committing to personalized training and stuff. Yeah.
The message, and in general, how you were able to make GPT-4 more steerable based on the interaction that the user can have with it, which is one of its big, really powerful things.
So the system message is a way to say, hey, model, please pretend like or please only answer this message as if you were Shakespeare doing thing X, or please only respond with JSON no matter what, was one of the examples from our blog post. But you could also say any number of other things to that. And then we tune GPT-4 in a way to really treat the system message with a lot of authority. I'm sure there'll always, not always, hopefully, but for a long time, there'll be more jailbreaks, and we'll keep sort of learning about those. But we develop, whatever you want to call it, the model in such a way to learn that it's supposed to really use that system message.
Can you speak to kind of the process of writing and designing a great prompt as you steer GPT-4?
I'm not good at this. I've met people who are.
Yeah.
And the creativity, some of them almost treat it like debugging software. Mm-hmm. But also I met people who spend 12 hours a day for months on end on this, and they really get a feel for the model and a feel how different parts of a prompt compose with each other.
Like literally the ordering of words,
where you put the clause, when you modify something, what kind of word to do it with.
Yeah, it's so fascinating because
it's remarkable.
In some sense, that's what we do with human conversation, right? In interacting with humans, we try to figure out what words to use to unlock greater wisdom from the other party, the friends of yours or significant others. Here you get to try it over and over and over and over. Unlimited, you could experiment.
Yeah, there's all these ways that the kind of analogies from humans to AIs break down, and the parallelism, the sort of unlimited rollouts. That's a big one.
Yeah, but there's still some parallels that don't break down. There is something 100%. Deeply, because it's trained on human data. There's it feels like it's a way to learn about ourselves by interacting with it. Some of it, as the smarter and smarter it gets, the more it represents, the more it feels like another human in terms of the kind of way you would phrase a prompt to get the kind of thing you want back. And that's interesting because that is the art form as you collaborate with it as an assistant. This becomes more relevant this is relevant everywhere, but it's also very relevant for programming, for example.
Matt, are you interested in this part?
I could probably skip it and go to what would be the next
Well, we got about 15 minutes left, so it may be like hitting a little bit on the nonprofit to cap profit, so like the business model change, and then if there's a little, I can mention a little bit of the Microsoft if we need to.
So OpenAI went stopped being nonprofit or split up in 20. Can you describe that whole process?
Yeah.
How
So
things stand?
we started as a nonprofit. We learned early on that we were going to need far more capital than we were able to raise as a nonprofit. Our nonprofit is still fully in charge. There is a subsidiary capped profit so that our investors and employees can earn a certain fixed return. And then beyond that, everything else flows to the nonprofit. And the nonprofit is like in voting control, lets us make a bunch of non-standard decisions, can cancel equity, can do a whole bunch of other things, can let us merge with another org, protects us from making decisions that are not in any like shareholders' interest. So I think it's a structure that has been important to a lot of the decisions we've made.
What went into that decision process for taking a leap from nonprofit to capped for-profit? What are the pros and cons you were deciding at the time? I mean, this was 2019.
It was really like, to do what we needed to go do, we had tried and failed enough to raise the money as a nonprofit. We didn't see a path forward there. So we needed some of the benefits of capitalism, but not too much. I remember at the time someone said, as a nonprofit, not enough will happen. As a for-profit, too much will happen. So we need this sort of strange intermediate.
Well, you kind of had this offhand comment of you worry about the uncapped companies that play with AGI. Can you elaborate on the worry here? Because AGI, out of all the technologies we have in our hands, has the potential to make, because the cap is 100x for OpenAI.
It started as that. It's much, much lower for like new investors now.
AGI can make a lot more than 100x.
For sure.
And so how do you compete, stepping outside of OpenAI, how do you look at a world where Google is playing, where Apple and Meta are playing?
We can't control what other people are going to do. We can try to build something and talk about it and influence others and provide value and, good systems for the world, but they're going to do what they're going to do. Now, I think right now there's extremely fast and not super deliberate motion inside of some of these companies. But already I think people are, as they see the rate of progress, already people are grappling with what's at stake here. And I think the better angels are going to win out.
Can you elaborate on that? The better angels of individuals? The individuals within
and
the
companies. But, the incentives of capitalism to create and capture unlimited value, I'm a little afraid of. But again, no, I think no one wants to destroy the world. No one wakes up saying today I want to destroy the world. So we've got the Moloch problem. On the other hand, we've got people who are very aware of that. And I think a lot of healthy conversation about how can we collaborate to minimize some of these very scary downsides.
Well, nobody wants to destroy the world. Let me ask you a tough question. So you are very likely to be one of, if not the person that creates AGI.
Yeah, so I thought we'd go ahead and skip ahead to the Microsoft and him talking about his relationship with Satya, I think would be cool.
Okay, sounds good.
Microsoft announced a new multi-year, multi-billion-dollar, reported to be $10 billion investment into OpenAI. Can you describe the thinking that went into this? What are the pros? What are the cons of working with a company like Microsoft?
It's not all perfect or easy, but on the whole, they have been an amazing partner to us. Satya and Kevin and Mikhail are super aligned with us, super flexible, have gone way above and beyond the call of duty to do things that we have needed to get all this to work. This is a big, iron, complicated engineering project, and they are a big and complex company. And I think many great partnerships or relationships, we've sort of just continued to ramp up our investment in each other, and it's been very good. It's
a for-profit company. It's very driven. It's very large scale. Is there pressure to kind of make a lot of money?
I think most other companies wouldn't. Maybe now they would. It wouldn't at the time have understood why we needed all the weird control provisions we have and why we need all the kind of like AGI specialness. Mm-hmm. And I know that because I talked to some other companies before we did the first deal with Microsoft. And I think they are unique in terms of the companies at that scale that understood why we needed the control provisions we have.
And so those control provisions help make sure that the capitalist imperative does not affect the development of AI. Well, let me just ask you, as an aside about Satya Nadella, the CEO of Microsoft. He seems to have successfully transformed Microsoft into this fresh, innovative, developer-friendly company.
I agree.
I mean, it's really hard to do for a very large company. What have you learned from him? Why do you think he was able to do this kind of thing? What insights do you have about why this one human being is able to contribute to the pivot of a large company to something very new?
I think most CEOs are either great leaders or great managers. And from what I have observed with Satya, he is both. Super visionary, really like gets people excited, really makes long duration and correct calls. And also, he is just a super effective hands-on executive and I assume manager too. And I think that's pretty rare.
I mean, Microsoft, I'm guessing, like IBM or like a lot of companies that have been at it for a while, probably have like old school kind of momentum. So you like inject AI into it, it's very tough. Or anything, even like open source, the culture of open source. Like how hard is it to walk into a room and be like, the way we've been doing things are totally wrong? Like, I'm sure there's a lot of firing involved or a little like twisting of arms or something. So do you have to rule by fear, by love? Like, what can you say to the leadership aspect of this?
I mean, he's just like done an unbelievable job, but he is amazing at being like clear and firm and getting people to want to come along, but also like compassionate and patient with his people too.
I'm getting a lot of love, not fear.
I'm a big Satya fan.
So am I from a distance.
I did want to just bring up the announcement here. $10 billion is a load of money.
Yeah.
And also there's the initial, this is the initial announcement from 2019. And basically they just said they bought the model, for $1 billion.
Right.
Or bought an exclusive license. None of OpenAI runs on anything other than Microsoft Azure. So it's like all the infrastructure, all that. That's where that partnership has been focused.
Oh, okay.
They were building out the Azure technologies, ports all its services over to Azure, and then Microsoft becomes OpenAI's preferred partner for commercializing the new technologies. So that was the deal back in 2019. And then this is from January of this year, where they're extending it with a $10 billion injection. And a lot of people are like, okay, what is that going to really mean?
Right. Wow.
And it's not terribly detailed in here, but we'll just have to see what that comes. Oh, well, here we go. Rumors of the deal suggest Microsoft may receive 75% of OpenAI's profits until it returned its investment and a 49% stake in the company. Gotcha. So there's been quite, and that's where the Elon kind of back and forth came from. Yeah, that got us exactly where we needed to be, and I think that's a good conversation for me to work from. Thank you, Matt, for once again spearheading this.